All right. Hi, Win. How are you today?
Hey, all right, Isabel, how are you this week?
Good. Welcome, listeners, to the podcast Synergy, where we talk about our journey. And this week theme is illusion.
Illusion. And we've already been having a lot of people comment on our podcast already. And I've tried podcasting in the past, and I haven't really had the interaction that you and I are already getting. And for the listeners out there, thank you for dialing in and really having such great things to say. And
Yeah.
just before Isabel and I went live, we're discussing ways that we can make this more accessible to you to be interactive and more perks for you when we start to get deeper into how we format this.
Yeah. And when I think it would be cool if listeners, you could um, suggest any subject that they would want us to talk
Yes.
about. So that is also
Yeah.
an opportunity. If there's anything you want to hear us
Yeah.
talk about, just bring it up.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we're putting that out there now. Like, if you're hearing this now and you got something that you think you'd love to hear us communicate about, by all means, this is the time to let us know.
Yeah,
And I know we're going to add this to our web pages as well. I haven't done that yet. I need to add that to my web page.
that's right.
My web page is Melmin the Sorcerer, MELMIN thesorcerer.com. And Isabel, what's yours?
Hey, that's a good question. I just changed it. So, but you can find
Ah,
it on Facebook. So it's Oasis Wellness Consulting on Facebook.
Oasis Wellness Consulting. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And interestingly, what the most recent comment that we did have on our social media about podcasting is um, they love our perspective and our groundedness and our kind of our banter back and forth, how we just flow and we're easy to listen to. And we want to make sure that we're always that.
I really appreciated that comment because she said something in the sense that we were slow, but in the sense that it was easy to follow us. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that because that was the idea at the beginning that we started the podcast was like,
Yes.
we want to make sure people follow us and
Right.
understand our journey because our journey is probably similar to anyone's journey in some
Yeah.
way. So
In some way. Yeah, I think so too. That between the two of us, we probably would reach most people's journey at some point. There's a lot of similarities that we share with others, and I know we want to be accessible, and that's been our biggest thing right from the get-go.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're trying to be real, right? And I
we
know
are.
it's our fourth episode, but I don't know if the listeners know how we design the concept. We basically pick a word,
Yeah,
and sometimes it's 5 minutes before the podcast.
literally like last week.
Yeah, and we just talk about it, and it's very like what you see is not practice. Wind and I are
No,
chatting. It's discussions and
which brings us back to illusions. We haven't even discussed what we're going to talk about it, so let's dive in. Like,
yeah.
how did that illusions come to you? This week, Isabel picked the word, or the word picked Isabel.
Yeah, it really picked me. It just popped in my head, and it's something that I guess you opened my eyes to the illusion when we
Mm.
first connected. You mentioned that because, and my dog's name is Maya, which
Mm.
I think also means illusion. Correct?
It means illusion in Sanskrit.
Yeah.
Somebody
So,
might say it means something else, but the funny thing about Sanskrit is it's also it's as unique as the deities that come from ancient India. So one person will say Vishnu means this, another person will say Vishnu means this. And so I've discovered that with Sanskrit, words also sort of change depending on the person.
oh, that's
So,
interesting.
so Maya typically we understand as the illusion,
Okay.
but a listener may have a different interpretation, and you also had a different interpretation of Maya,
Ah, that's interesting.
didn't you?
Well, for me, it makes sense because Maya came in my life when I started like the awakening and the illusion. For me, like when I started talking with you, it made me realize that everything is an illusion in terms of the physical world. So
Hmm.
I think I want to dive a little bit deeper into that with you today,
Yeah.
comprehend it because I know you master it a little bit more than me. So.
Probably to the dismay of people who come into my work for a little while at least. But yes, it's probably my favorite topic.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, great, good. Well, Go ahead. You have the floor.
Oh, well, I wanted to hear about, okay, so let's come back to you then. I, I, so at the beginning of my awakening, at the
Yeah.
beginning of my noticeable awakening, I mean, stuff was already happening for quite some time, but I was in the University of Minnesota. Had just retired from the Navy about a year prior, and I was getting my graduate degree in nonprofit management and what you call it, public affairs. So it was the MPA, Master of Public Affairs program, and it was in the Hubert Humphrey School of Public Affairs on campus there, for anybody who's aware of that. And I was in the very first cohort program, also for listeners who may be aware of this, where we consolidated all the requirements that were necessary for the MPA program into one weekend per month, like being in the National Guard or the military reserves. One weekend per month, a full slam, statistics, leadership, you name it, entrepreneurial stuff. And during the course of my two semesters, 2 of 3 semesters there, I was just like slipping further and further and further, trying to find a thesis to hone in on, whether it was women's empowerment, maybe human trafficking. It was all revolving around women type of stuff, feminine energy. And I had very recently just retired from the Navy, so I was still thinking going to the CIA or the State Department. I was still thinking very much in the linear world. But all these things were just like boom, boom, like dropping me like an elevator, just being dropped from floor to floor. And I was going deeper, and I was like, I can't focus on anything. Is this just because I just retired from the Navy? Or I don't understand, and I'm not used to being entrepreneurial, used to thinking outside of a particular box that's already formulated. And suddenly I just couldn't figure out, because then all of a sudden the school was picking on my political party. I mean, not just in a ribbing way, like, inter-service, inter-brand military services, Navy, Army, you name it, we're always bickering, but we're always like, in the end of the day, we're going to work together. In this school, they were literally saying that the Republicans were sons of bitches. They were just going off on Republicans in a way that wasn't ribbing. It was like breeding hate, pure hate. And it was really obtuse, and I really had a hard time with that. So this was all like concocting this brew inside of me. And plus my home life was nuclear as well. Like all these things that were going on between my mom and my dad and my daughter, and you name it, my wife at the time, my whole world was imploding. And so, so kind of going in between semesters over Christmas break, I actually didn't think I was going to come back. I thought I was done, but I decided to come back because everything was already falling apart in my world. Plus the faculty was not really like what I really wanted in my life. I went back, and kind of halfway through that second semester, I started to just really slip, and I started to have visions, and I started to have fairy energy come into me, and I started to have ladybugs appear when it's 3 feet of snow outside in Minneapolis, and there's ladybugs crawling around. They shouldn't even be alive,
Right.
In March, and so all this weird stuff was making me take notice. And then at the time I started to read a book that I'd never heard of called Illusions from Richard Bach.
Okay.
And Richard Bach is the author of a famous book that we've probably all read in at least US schools, or at least had read to us in grade school, called Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Yeah, I read that book too.
All right. And we all know that book, but not as many people know Illusions, and yet Illusions is sold millions of copies worldwide. Same author. And it was like that book hit me at the right time, and I read the book. It's not a big read. It's actually an easy read. It's not a big book, and I just like slipped deeper into what the transition from the linear world into this nonlinear world happened right through that book. And so when it came time to do our final project in May, I did it, and I used the cover of that book, Illusions, as the beginning of my PowerPoint presentation. And I took people through a journey the best I could at that time. It wasn't, and only 2 of my classmates went, I got it. The rest of them, including the faculty, were mad. They were like livid that I don't even understand what you were talking about. I mean, they were
That's interesting.
so angry. They were so angry. It was so funny. And I was doing the best I could. I was trying to communicate that, but
Yeah.
That all this stuff that had been happening was, I was trying to focus on something, and what I realized is I couldn't focus on anything, that nobody was right. I would sit in our critical thinking classes where they're telling you how to think, by the way. It's really weird. Let me tell you how to think critically instead of let me tell you what critical thinking is, where you think for yourself. And I'd go like, this wall behind me, we have students from Kyrgyzstan in our class, Pakistan, India, and then we have American students all from different parts of the country who all speak different languages because of our nuances in different parts of the country. And I said, I'm looking at this wall, and this is a wall, but in Hindi, you're going to call it one thing. In Pakistani, you're going to call it another thing.
Right.
In Kyrgyzstan, you're going to call it another thing. Women and men are going to interpret different because women and men interpret data differently. I said, and bottom line is, we all agree that there's something here, but we don't all agree on the interpretation of it. We agree that if we put our hand on it, we consider it solid, but even when we say solid, what does that mean? That depends on the language. That depends on are you a scientist? Are you a scientist that knows that a solid, subatomic particles don't actually ever touch? So there's actually not even a such thing as solid. What I'm saying is, what I was saying then is that nothing has a solid basis. We make an agreement and we try to stick to an agreement, and then we try to conform about that, and then that's within our own demographic, our own town, our own language. But then we start to spread that out culturally, and we don't have agreements. And then if you didn't take physics and you don't know that subatomic particles mean that nothing's ever touching. My hands aren't actually touching right now.
Right.
When I give a hug, we're not actually touching. If you don't know that, you also don't know a deeper truth. And that's just scientific.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to illusions, like that beginning of my awakening started to become a theme that would tell me who I was, as opposed to me seeking that over and over, to the point where I couldn't find a truth in anything, ever.
Wow.
Truth is whatever we decide it is. And
that's
if we get agreement.
And no one got it except for 2 people.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They could feel it, and they couldn't even talk about it. They could just feel it.
Right. That's it. I wonder if you were to redo that today, if there would be more people.
Yeah.
It's just.
I just did for our podcast listeners. I just redid it.
Exactly. Let's see how many people react to this.
So yeah, what's your take on all that then, Isabel? Because
On what? Sorry.
So illusions, like what I just said, your own inspiration for illusion.
Yeah, for me, like I use it and I bring it back into my mind, I guess, or awareness when when I'm stressed or when things are not going my way, like the way that I want it to go. And I think for me, that's what helps me move on, because I always think like the illusion is basically like whatever's, like, let's take the example of stress. Whatever is bringing me stress is actually not really real. Like it's not tangible and not concrete. It's just a perception. It's a creation of my mind, basically, right? It's a creation from my thoughts. It's a creation from expectations that I have, which is not real in some ways, or can shift easily. And I think that's the key for me. Is illusion is in the sense that nothing is real, but at the same time you can create whatever you want. And that's what I love about it, is that whole creativity piece about it. And it's like just before we started, so I sent you an image of my computer that was updating, and it had been updating since 9 a.m.
Wow.
And it was stuck there, and I sent it to you, I think like at 3:30 or something like that. And I was like, I hope like that it gets like that everything gets like completed before it gets completed before basically like we start the podcast. Right. And it was so funny because I think 5 minutes before we connected, the computer basically was done updating, and it had been like on the same image since 9 a.m. And I just thought, this is so funny. And that's the illusion for me, because it's like the capacity to create whatever you want. And I told the computer, I was like, you can do whatever you want. I need you to be like ready to roll at 4:24. And at
Mhm.
4:20 something, it was done and it was ready to roll. So,
And on top of that, we were going to start at 4, but I had just got done with a bunch of errands, and
right.
I said, "Hey, I'm going to have to go until 4:30." So
4:30.
there's
Everything.
there's an interesting tie-in with all that.
It did.
They wouldn't have been ready.
Yeah. And I thought normally I would have been stressed about it. I would have like fuss about it. And then I thought, no, this is just again an illusion in the sense I can create whatever I want. And I
Uh-huh.
decide that the computer is gonna work.
Yeah, right.
So for
That's
me,
interesting.
the illusion is very much connected to magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the magician, the creation, like the it's an illusion, but yet it feels so real. But you can trick people with it,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that aspect of the illusion. The more
Mm-hmm.
that um, the more I play with it in the sense of if I create a situation in my work, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to look at how people react and see what are their realities. Like, in what reality are they? Does that make sense? Do you, like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if they react with laughter, okay, I know in which,
Yes.
like which space they are. If they react with anger, okay, I know which reality they're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it
Yeah.
kind of like something I love playing with in some.
I think, and you just hit a really key point about an illusion is it's not really time and space based
Yeah,
because the outside of the human form, there really is no time and space.
true.
Even in the animal world, I think we can argue easily that they're not living in time and space. They're doing what they're doing.
Yeah,
It's our mind that has a construct of seasons, a clock, a calendar, things
right.
like this. And then animals don't think about it, or creatures, or flora and any of that. They just operate, and that's it. They go with what is.
That's
And
so true.
so automatically, human time and space is a human construct. And then on top of that, what you were just saying is you just said whatever that person is experiencing now. So if they're laughing now or if they're angry now, just the fact that most people aren't actually living in the exact same feeling or the emotion all the time, that
Right.
also tells you that we are fluctuating between energy fields all the time. We're
That's
not actually, if everything was concrete, we would always be angry or we would always be sad. And some people probably lean more on one than the other, but
yeah.
it's doubtful that anybody is so concrete that's all they ever experience is just anger or sadness or happiness. Pure, you know, we fluctuate. Just that alone makes the whole dynamic of being alive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fluid, but it's not solid. You
No,
know.
no, it's so true. And I always say like emotions are temporary. So if you feel anger right now, it's gonna go away. So like
Right.
why get stuck into that? Like just let it pass. It's time. And so
One of the most interesting experiences I had, not maybe a year and a half, 2 years, maybe 2 years or so after. I mean, I've had many, but okay. So this was in 2011 May that I did that thing in the University of Minnesota. So actually, about 2 years, 3 years later, in 2014, Allison, my twin flame, and I, we were in Asia. We were in the back of a pickup, and we were going from kind of a little rural town in
okay.
between Chiang Rai and Chiang Mai, if people know Thailand. And so we were in this little village called Vieng Papao in this little treetop community, and we were staying there. And the people wanted to take us to Chiang Mai. We needed to see Chiang Mai anyway. It's a popular place to go visit in Thailand, but also it was the Chinese New Year, the Thai New Year,
Okay.
and so they had all over they had a thing going on, but they wanted us to go to Chiang Mai for the big festivities. So they put us stacked a bunch of us in the back of this pickup. It was a Toyota Tundra, actually. I remember. So we were in the back of it, and we were going really fast, and we were sitting across from each other in the bed of the pickup,
Yeah.
several of us. And if I would focus on the person in front of me while the person in front of me was talking, then
Yeah.
all the beautiful trees and flowers and stuff behind that person I wasn't focusing on. So then they just became a stream of colors. And the faster we went and the less I paid attention, that stream of colors became invisible. If maybe at best I could see energy flowing.
Okay.
And if I took my focus off of the person and then looked at the trees and foliage, then they appeared, and the person in front of me became sort of my periphery. That alone tells you whatever we focus on is
Yes.
what's real for us at the moment. What we are not focusing on, we observe it, but it's not necessarily solid anymore.
Right.
It's only solid when we pay attention to it. Like, and the faster the frequency, the faster the velocity goes, the less we actually see anything solid.
Yeah.
And and so then
Oh,
that, and then that's only what's in front of us or in our periphery. What about behind us? We're not seeing anything. There may be cars going behind us, snakes crawling, cows, whatever, you name it. That's not real to us because we can't even see it. It's because we're very egocentric in a body and we can only see so far. And on top of that, we can only see a certain amount of spectrum of colors within the eyes that we have, and we can only hear a certain amount of decibels of what's possible to hear. We're still only observing whatever we can, which means there's a lot going on around us that's equally real if we can tune into it and equally unreal if we can't. So
yeah.
there's more illusion.
It's such a great point. Like, it's so important because, I'm thinking of people who don't have all their senses. So, for example, if you're deaf, if you're blind,
Right?
like your reality is completely different.
Completely
And
different.
and I'm sure if you were born with the capacity to see and then you lose sight in your life, like your reality must be shifting, like
Yeah.
unreal. Like, so it is such an important, because I remember always struggling. Like, one of the thing I always struggle with was, and that sounds silly, but that's how my mind functioned,
Mm-hmm.
was the phone. So how does cell phone work? Like
Mm.
you can't see the connection, but yet I can talk to my brother who's in Germany, and
Mm.
he sounds like he's right here, or just like we're connecting, you and I
Right.
right now, like all those wireless. So for me, like, I always thought it was hilarious that people trusted that the phone worked, but
Mm.
yet didn't believe that there was energy that was in the space, and
Right.
maybe like entities in the same space that we can't see, but they are there, but yet they believe
Right.
into the cell phone capacity. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
to explain, but
Exactly.
I always thought it was interesting that we never question how, like, our wireless works. Like, it's
Right.
actually amazing. It's an
And
amazing.
and then the listeners who are listening to us after this is already recorded and put up in no physical location at all for you to tap into later and listen to at any time you want to.
You're so right. Like, there's no physical matter here. Like, it's all like energy.
It's all energy.
Yeah.
And we're playing with it more and more in the physical world, making things like this. And still that isn't, for some reason, the synapses aren't firing in most humans that, hey, there's more to things than
Yeah, there's so much more than the
we just
eye.
take it for granted. There's
Yeah.
a meme that I saw on Instagram like last year, and it was a black guy who had posted this meme, and he so he had, he also had kind of the more common lingo that maybe I don't really have, and it was like, the meme was what it said. What did it say? It said, what when I learn how to teleport from one spot to another, haters gonna be like, you couldn't afford a car, motherfucker. And it's like,
Right.
it's true. Like,
Yeah.
people are literally gonna go, oh wow, you just levitated or you just moved a mountain telepathically. So what the fuck is wrong with you? Instead of going, what the hell? How did you even do that?
It's so true.
Nothing. They're not even gonna go that. How is that even possible? They're gonna go like, the mind, because the mind is not, we have trained it out of knowing what energy really is.
Right. And just it's so true. Exactly. Like, for me, like, being capable to speak wirelessly, like with no concrete physical cable or,
Uh-huh.
the can box.
Right.
um that's all about energy, is the capacity to play with frequencies and vibration, and it just
Yes.
amazes me that we trust in that, and we're like, yeah, that's normal, that's science.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then again, we have a hard time with intuition and just illusions that we are there, but we don't see it as our reality yet. So
So what are some things then that you feel, besides what we're talking about, what are some other things in this realm of that we're kind of skirting around it that tie into the illusion for you? Like what else? What else is there? Whether it's other beings or other things, what is it?
I think death is one of them for me,
Mm,
like dying or aging. um
right.
it's a big illusion, I feel, and I think I shared that with you before, but I know that I'm a really old soul, and it's not my first time as a human experience. Like,
Mm,
I almost want to say I know that for a fact, but it's my intuition.
mm-hmm.
And I feel like I was never scared of death. I'm scared of dying because of, like, how is that going to happen? Like, the pain and the
Oh,
suffering scares me.
right,
But
right,
the
right.
actual thought that I'm no longer going to be on earth is not something that stress me, or aging is not something that bothers me, and that I don't mind talking about it either. So for me, like, preparing my physical death is not a big deal.
Yeah.
And I rather actually have it in my awareness, because it keeps me grateful for what I have and what I'm going through and who I'm with, and being present, right? So
Mm-hmm.
knowing that this human experience is only for a short time in the history of the universe, I guess. But
And it's
that's
funny because people will think the history of the universe, how many billions of years, but I think when we know energy, we know there's no such thing.
right, exactly.
There's zero. There's zero.
There's
And for me, when I think of other lives that I say that I've had, I
yeah.
don't believe in reincarnation, nor do I believe in past lives, future lives.
Oh,
It's
you
all
don't.
now. It's all concurrent. And
Right.
it's not that I just decided to believe in that. I just actually have witnessed in energy form other versions of myself that I would call future or that
Yeah.
I would call past based off of human evolution.
Okay.
But they're all occurring now. And actually, Eckhart Tolle might even have a good way of saying that, just that everything comes down to the present moment.
That's so
Now,
true.
how he perceives that himself, I don't know. Does he perceive it the way I'm communicating about it, or you're communicating about it? It almost doesn't really matter, because the truth is that whatever we do in our present moment, all the choices that we make now, if they align with something that makes us more holistic, which then makes our experience in the world more holistic and
Mm.
everything more streamlined and more harmonious, then we're fixing any snags from what some people will call past lives. We're fixing any snags from what other people will call future lives.
Okay.
We're eradicating all of the stuck points in the present moment by choices that we make now. And choices that we make now, we can make all of them. We can make any choice that we want to all the time, which is part of the illusion. We can always make any choice that we want to, but when we make a choice that feels like it's new and scary, that's the one that we haven't made in what we call past lives before. That's the road less traveled in our soul's journey.
Right.
That's the one that's going to take us out of a stuck point, out of the shadow work that we were talking about last episode. And the shadow work is the one from these other lives of stuck points. That's it. And
Huh.
so when we make choices that are scary and make us bigger and stronger and happier and more connected to oneness and unity,
Yeah.
that fixes all the other lifetimes. So it really would just come back to what Eckhart Tolle says, that everything comes down to the present
The
moment.
now. Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard for me. Like, this is the kind of stuff, and maybe other listeners will relate to me about that, but this is the kind of stuff that give my human brain a headache. Like whole the
Ah.
whole time perspective and parallels, like that
Mm,
for me is so hard to comprehend. And I know I have a resistance there. Like I've
yeah.
always had that difficulty with time, and like that is probably the biggest illusion that I
Uh,
don't comprehend yet. Like the
okay.
whole time perspective is
Yes.
very challenging, because I kind of understand when you talk about it, but
Hmm.
then I start thinking, but okay, why do I have all those memories? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, why do I
Hmm.
see this? Is it happening at the same time in another like parallel? Like,
Uh-huh.
so my
Yes,
mind gets
it
stuck,
is.
right?
It's
Like,
very concurrent. And that the only way to make that stop is to go
mhm,
into your heart, to relax, to
exactly,
be present, like we talked about last episode, to be the observer. And the
exactly.
more we do that in our stuck points, the more we break apart what we would call multiple lifetimes worth of limitations in lessons. We start to funnel it back into the present moment.
I love that, because you're right. Like, I utilize my mind, and my mind with my ego, right?
Hmm.
Driven or controlled by my ego, as opposed to connect with my heart, which is the place that allow me probably to comprehend that concept even more, experience
Hmm.
it more than comprehend.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I have the converse issue that you do. You have the trying to understand that all. I have the knowing of that all and trying to fit it into my human experience.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
my challenge is to take all of that and be okay with being in a body because I always want to punch out because I know that it's so easy. The
right.
hard part, as
It's
I've experienced it across these numerous lifetimes that are all concurrent, but that in the time evolution span of the human evolution, human timeline, history, whatever we call it. But basically, I've seen myself in what we would say is past lives, and I do well all the time. But I also know when it's time to just leave. What I've learned this time over the last few years of this journey is that how easy that is for me, and that's why I always kind of want to leave the body. But the challenge for me is to stay in the body and continue to live among human consciousness
yeah.
with the consciousness that is not human and get the two to fuse together to evolve and to create that symbiotic relationship where everything of all my lifetimes is occurring completely in the now and that I have zero issue being in the human form. All I want to do then is play and have fun and create and do it as long as possible. It's almost like the ultimate game is to figure out how to do it while in a body and not leave your body until you complete the game.
Yeah.
And so that's my challenge. And when I get overwhelmed, I'm like, fuck it, I'm out of here. I'm just gonna
You
I'm
just,
leaving. I'm like, I don't need this shit. My consciousness is so big. Like, I don't need this stupid human shit. And then I'm like, but wait, if I leave, I'll miss all the stuff that could happen from me actually getting this right.
yes, yeah. It's so true. It's such an interesting way to see it, because so many people struggle with just the idea of the illusion. For you, you
Yeah.
comprehend it, you know it, but you
Yes.
struggle with going with the human experience, basically.
Yes. Yeah. Whereas you, my coworker who put me in contact, or put me and Allison, my twin flame, in contact with this radio show host that she was just on the other night. So my coworker and you, like you guys, are amongst many that I'm around who say, I actually know that this stuff exists. I know in what maybe we call the third dimension, the fourth dimension, the fifth.
Right.
But my thing is like I really want to learn to be human. Like I'm really okay with that. I love it. There's so many things I get to do that obviously I wouldn't be able to do if I weren't in the body. So I end up kind of in this, and even Allison herself, communicates the same thing. Like, it's so precious being in the body. I never carried that consciousness. I carried that it's a game and nothing matters. I meet people like yourselves who are like, but everything does matter, because we only get the opportunity in this body for a certain period of actual time and space in the human construct.
Right.
And like, all the things that we get to do are so unique to the experience. And these are the things that challenge me, and probably why I end up around people like yourself, because it helps me remember, yes, it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. And that's another piece you're asking, like, what does the illusion connect with? And when you say fun and human experience, I say the suffering is one of the biggest illusion that
Totally.
people think that we have to be suffering on earth. It has to be like, it has
Yes.
to be difficult. It has to be tough in order to do the awakening or in order to reach
Oh
consciousness.
my
Like,
God, right?
it's such one of the biggest, like, myth. I think it's
Yeah.
a total myth. It's not
Yeah.
true, and it can be fun, and the
Right.
suffering can end. And I think that's one of the illusion that, like, humankind has totally believed in, that it was supposed to be a suffering.
When my awakening first began, and the people I was surrounded with were like, "Oh my God, you're definitely a shaman," I started going, well, I don't know what that means. I have an inference based off of my knowledge of what shamans have been in indigenous ways. I'm white. I'm in big city America, like in Minneapolis and Boise at the time. I'm like, I'm not in a village. Who the fuck is going to come to me as a shaman? Like, what does that even mean? And they're like, no, but you'll figure it out. Anyway, so I went on YouTube and I went on Google and I started searching people who were shamans. And interestingly, the native shamans, you're never going to find them on YouTube or on Google. They're out doing their
I was
job.
about to say they're hiding somewhere in the forest.
So I would say the real shamans are actually just out living their thing and not on social media and talking about, I'm a shaman. Number one. So that already struck me. Number two, the people I would come across are like, I'm a shaman, which means I feel your pain and I really like, and I help you relieve your pain by feeling your pain. I'm like, I don't know yet. I didn't know yet what I know about now about the illusion and suffering and all that. But I knew that I was listening to a bunch of fucking idiots.
But that was their reality they created, right? That's what they totally believe that stuff too. They think it's the truth.
I've now met several indigenous shamans in the Amazon,
Yeah.
and if they heard that story, they'd laugh their fucking ass off and smoke one of these big mapacho cigarettes, which is a master plant in the Amazon, and
Okay.
probably take a big puff and blow it in your face and laugh at you because you're a fucking idiot.
That's,
Because I guarantee you, they're empathic enough to feel what's going on,
yeah.
and that's where it stops. Just because they have to be able to read the energy, but saying, I'm a fucking martyr because I need to carry the cross with you, that's old Jesus Christ shit that actually has never served it's served our evolution in a way, yes. But calling that the be all end all of being a healer and an empath and a psychic and a shaman, like, you're just a jackass. That's just, somebody's going to have to rectify that thinking in you, or you're going to die suffering, which is totally your choice and part of the illusion for you.
Right.
But saying that across the board is the reality, no, no,
No.
no. That's actually being in kindergarten when you should be at a PhD level.
And it's so true because one of the things that I learned very early in life is that there's not one truth. And I teach classes, and I teach fitness classes, and
Okay.
I always told my students, you want to go see other teachers because they'll
Yes.
teach different than me and they'll say different things than me. But
Yeah.
one thing, don't allow one person to tell you you cannot do one move, or you cannot do, or you're doing something
Yeah.
wrong. Like, you might not be doing it like they are. It doesn't mean it's wrong,
Right.
unless you're hurting yourself or whatsoever. But
Yeah.
I was teaching Egyptian dance, which there is so many variants in one movement, and we all teach it differently. But I remember some students coming in and be like, oh, my teacher told me that that's not the move. And I was like, well, you have to understand that there is a lot of variance. Like there's so many different tribes and cultures in Egypt that all different little village have a different movement. And
Mm-hmm.
and all that to say that for me, that's always been so important. If I have a teacher, so for example, if I had a Reiki teacher that told me that, I don't know, that the only way to heal people is Reiki, right? Because I'm sure there's people out there that say that stuff. And it's
It's
like,
so true.
no, like there's not only one way. And one thing that for me was so difficult was grounding myself. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
that also is an illusion, but for me it helped me. But everyone was telling me how to ground myself and it never worked. I was like, no, there's no way that's grounding me. And and yet I found a way to do it myself, and it was very different than other people.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that it's not the truth for me. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I
100%.
struggle. I struggle.
Uh, you actually just really excited me with a few of the things that you were saying. So
Yeah.
basically everything that you just said, I don't even want to try and go back through it, but it excites me because that's the ultimate truth. Really, if there's an ultimate truth to human existence, it's finding the way that makes you operate the best that you can and letting it be fluid from moment to moment. So it's taking all the tools that you accumulate from different teachers, different experiences that you're having, consolidating it, and that's where I am right now. I've gone through, and actually the Native Americans, I don't remember which tribe, used to have a saying, and so it obviously still exists, but this is based off the human lasting about 40 years, so earlier, a couple hundred years ago or whatever, this saying has been around, but they said that you spend the first 20 years of your life putting tools into your toolbox and the last 20 years of your life taking them back out and learning how to use them.
I love that.
And so, I think everything that you just said is we're always learning. So you're always actually putting tools in your box. Now, what I've discovered now at this stage is, as you know, I hit a point of being in the Ascended Master realms earlier this year.
Yeah.
So now I didn't understand what that meant, but now I do. It's, being a master is actually, when I think about it, it goes back to my shaman mentor down in the Amazon, who's from here in North Carolina. And he's lived down in the Amazon for about 20 years, working with the indigenous, has a center down there. But it goes, to me, it goes just kind of, what he said is that when he had been doing this inner work for 10 years with the different plants down there and different teachers, at
Yeah.
10 years, he goes, oh my God, I hit a level of mastery. Now the learning really begins.
And it's so true. Yeah. True.
So now I was like, oh my God, I understand that. To about 2 years later, I hit my ascended mastery. And now I'm like, oh, okay. And what this means now is all the tools I've ever put into my toolbox at the age of 47 and a half,
Yeah.
I'm now ready to start utilizing, which is funny. 47 and a half, put that, if I went with the Native American thing, I have 47 and a half years left to live, which would make me exactly 95, which is the year that I've already seen that there's going to be a world peace convergence in India and maybe other parts of the world. 2065. Holy cow, that just fully hit me right now. This month, because here in a few days is my birthday and I'll be 48. So at 47 and a half, with all of this, that's so funny. Anyway, so I'm going to spend at least until that point taking all the tools that I've accumulated up to that point, learning how to use them in my realm of mastery, in my personal creation, creating the world that I want, which means that people will come and go. Some will hang out for a long period of time. It doesn't mean that they're only writing my story, though. They're writing their own story along with me. I might be the big vision holder if people are kind of coming to me as a teacher for periods of time or for long periods of time or forever. I might be the vision holder for them for that duration. But because I have a strong vision, I'm working. But that every play needs actors and directors and script writers and editors and sound people and cinematographers. And so in Hollywood, those things are fluid. Steven Spielberg probably never carries the exact same crew 100% of the time. for every movie that he makes. And so now I'm a movie director. And so now I'm literally doing all of the things. I'm making my movie as I go, and I'm using all the tools that got me to this point. And I'm using the players that show up and saying, oh, here's your strength. Here's what you're good at. This is how you fit my story, and this is how I fit your story. So it's co-creative. It's not me running the show or them running the show. It's us creating this story for however long we decide to create the story. But for me, I'm always going to have the experience through my personal vessel. So my story will continue to build and build and build and build, and the world will be the way I want it to be based off all the tools that I've used up until now.
Yeah.
At any time, I could switch my story. I could say, and I could revert. Right now I'm in the transition. So at times I have these like, I need to revert because I'm feeling a little scared or overwhelmed. If I revert, I go back into a previous illusionary state of being.
Exactly.
And I don't want to do that. So I have to continue to press forward no matter how uncomfortable things become. And I've already learned how to operate it outside of my comfort zone. So now I have to keep pushing forward as the primary architect of my story, and allow and continue to call in from that frequency people who will fit to help me along the way, and hopefully my hope is that I'll have a lot of people and we'll all be co-creating this big story together where it's like, hey, you have this thing that you bring, like, let's go a long way with that, and let's see how we can elaborate my story and your story at the same time. What can we create? And that, I think that was a long way of saying that using the illusion, how we start to use that is saying that's our reality, whereas we might and we see it all the time, we cross paths with people who don't resonate. It just means that either right now, like you were saying, either right now we don't resonate because you're in a mood or I'm in a mood or whatever, but if we just don't resonate, maybe a year from now we will, or 6 months from now we will.
Maybe. That's so true.
And so that the illusion is just like, it's just a matter of like finding what works at any given time. It's a very malleable energy, but having a vision of what propels you forward based off all the tools that you have is kind of, I think, what you try to achieve as a level of mastery. And then the learning begins. Now you're learning how to use everything.
Yeah. And sometimes like you and I, you connect with people not even knowing what that vision is.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it's just unfold itself. Like if you're in the now and then you're with the flow, it's just going to show itself what it's going to happen. So.
And like we saw, like it kept thumping on our heads for a few months until we finally said, oh my God, this is what we're supposed to do.
What it is, yeah.
It was there, we just didn't know how to hear it.
Yeah.
And we had to align ourselves individually and then allow ourselves to communicate about it, which the ego sometimes will not allow that to happen.
That's true. And if we would have met 5 years ago, I would have been in a complete different stage of my life, not being open to it at all. So
totally.
It's fascinating how things like, and that's one thing, like what I loved about how we connected is like, we knew there was something we were supposed to co-create together, and we didn't necessarily share that like at first, but I had that feeling, and I'm sure you had that feeling, because we were always in contact, like always connecting, like, oh, I'll do a reading for you, you'll do the reading for me, like, and we'll go from there, and then start thinking, okay, are we supposed to do this? And then no, that's not it. And it's just funny how sometimes like just keeping that connection with someone when deep down intuitively this person is meant to be on your path, you just don't know why and what's the fit. And I feel like just following your intuition in these situations is the best you can do.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I'm sure if we would listen to this podcast, like if it was 5 years down the road, maybe let's do that in 5 years. Let's listen to this episode. Let's make a point.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. A few days before your birthday, we'll listen to it.
Yeah. It'll be interesting because everything in me believes that in 5 years, we're still going to be doing this podcast together.
I think so too.
but part of this whole process is to not be attached. Like you
Right.
can have these feelings, but you have to not be attached, because if you stay attached and it's actually supposed to break apart, you're
Yeah.
missing other things that are supposed to be going on.
That's so true. Like, and we tend to do that in the human experience, holding on to something because we think it's the right thing to do, as opposed
Uh,
to feels right.
right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a good point. Mm.
Yeah, it is. And it'll be interesting to see, like, yeah, so 5 years from now would be May of 2023. So if we remember in May of 2023 to go back and to listen to this podcast, and right now we have so much that we're tapped into. What will we be tapped into at that
At
point?
that point, yeah. Oh, I'm excited about the 2020.
Right? If we're still talking about the same exact things and we haven't evolved, we might want to ask ourselves that question in
Yeah,
5 years from
yeah,
now too.
exactly. Okay, future me, listen to that's so funny. Uh, I love that.
Well, it reminds me, on that, I think another thing that goes along with the illusion is, yeah, that you have to stay on the same perceived trajectory all the time. And then you have to be speaking the same message all the time, because that makes you, like, we have this perception of, and people ask me all the time, being who I am, very much wind and fire energy, like, who are you? Like, you represent so many things, but it used to be like a challenge, but now it's like fascination. Like this festival called Leaf here in Asheville that I just volunteered at. A guy that I volunteered with, I just told him my Navy story of all the different jobs that I did in the Navy. And he's like, man, who are you? But he was like, it was honoring, it was reverent. Like he was like, wow, I mean, you just have so much going on. And I
Mhm.
said, I guess I would just say that I'm everything and nothing at the same time, you know?
Thanks.
And he could hear that. He could hear that. And he wasn't a festival goer. He was a guy who twice every year, he gets paid to be staff at this thing because his mom's on the board of the festival.
Okay.
And so he's kind of almost voluntold to doing it, but he gets paid for it.
Mhm.
But he never attends any of the things in the festival because he's there before anything happens in the morning, and he leaves at the end of the day's festivities. So it's not like he is speaking the festival language. He's just a guy who lives in Nashville, whose mom's on the board, and he gets paid to do this twice a year,
Yeah.
And he's still like, when I said, I guess I would just say I'm everything and nothing, like it didn't even throw him off, It's almost like it just made him even more amiable with me. And so I guess my point is that it's okay for us to be all about something until it served its purpose. And then either we'll be guided away from it
Mhm.
or seemingly away from it, and we'll be guided into other things, either building upon it or something that seems totally unrelated. And if we don't remain attached, at some point, all of these things will circle back together. And when they do, more of the things that we've just accumulated since the last time we were around that part of the circle in our ever golden spiral twisting, like next time we come back around, we'll have more tools. And so if we don't get attached, we keep the spiral going, and it's always building upon itself. If we get attached, we stop the spiral from going.
It's stuck.
And that's where we get angry. That's where we feel suppressed. That's where we don't move forward in our creativity. That's when we say we need healing. That's when we say, we're suffering.
Yeah.
It's based off of the fact that we're not getting the message that's on the other end of the phone at the time, which is like, accept what's happening right now, love it, and let yourself move forward.
It's very similar to the concept of surrender, basically, right? Like
Totally.
surrender to it and don't try to hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because it like when you say how this person reacted to what you were saying, it just makes
Mm-hmm.
me realize that when you're meant to hear a message, you're fully open to it.
And you approach it with love.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's great. I didn't think about that, Isabel. That's great what you just said. I think really people really should take that in for a moment. If
Yeah,
you're ready to hear a message, you have this reverent experience when you hear it.
yeah, yeah. And you felt it from him too.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, maybe, and obviously, I need to hear something from that myself. So I work with that. Whatever he needed to hear from it helped him with something, and maybe he'll go, wait, there's more to my life than what I thought,
Yeah.
because the way he said it, like might have activated something in him that he's struggling with at the time. Like, how do I assimilate this and this? Oh, wait, I can be all of it. Who
Yeah.
knows how it plays out?
I love
You know.
that because I'm sure we've all experienced at one point in our life someone said something to us that was totally unexpected, but it was so welcome at that time. You were so open and it meant so much.
Mm,
And yet you were not expecting that coming from that person at all. Or
right. Right.
in other situation, you would have been triggered or you would have not even heard it.
Mm,
So I think it's interesting, like hearing that story.
yeah. I really feel like that kind of maybe would put a fine point on everything we're talking about today. Is that so? What's the point if everything is an illusion?
Mm.
The point is letting yourself get to those moments where you don't feel stuck anymore, and you have that ah. And you'll have many of them in your journey. I've had many where I've gone, okay, that's it. I'm not learning anymore, and then like back into the grind. You never get one ultimate until you're probably not in a body anymore.
True.
But so along the way, you get those and like really embrace that you just probably went through a new level, or you just brought in an answer to a problem that you've been trying to work with, and now you have more of an open channel to creating a more holistic journey with yourself based off of whatever just gave you that moment.
Right. And I think like when you say what's the purpose of this like the illusion too, in the human experience, that's how I truly feel that what it means for me, the illusion is that I can go in the human experience without having the suffering,
Mm-hmm.
knowing
Mm-hmm.
that it's all an illusion. I can still have my human experience, be on the physical plane,
Mm-hmm.
but yet knowing that everything is an illusion makes the human experience more fun, more bearable,
Totally.
or
I
more.
think so too. It's kind of like going to the end of a book or a magazine and and reading and seeing the ending, so that
Yeah,
at least now you know what the story is leading to.
what's coming
If you're
up.
like me, if you're like me and you're reading a story and you're hitting the part where everything is going wrong and you're just like, okay, I don't think I can read another sentence in this book because everything is going wrong.
Yeah.
When I do that, I'll go to the end of the book and I'll see just enough to go, does this progress, or are they going to end in the same misery? Because if they're going to end in the same misery, I'm throwing the book away. I'm not going to stay in a story that remains stuck.
Oh my goodness. I think we should conclude on this because you just made me think that knowing that in the end it's all an illusion, like
Uh-huh.
how are you going to live your life? Do you know?
Whoa. Yeah.
That's so deep.
Perfect. I'm good with calling it there. That's enough for people to go one way or the other, like decide what they want to do. Okay, that works for me.
Yeah, I like that. That was a great conversation. Thank you,
That
Wayne.
was good flow. Yeah, thank you, Isabella. We flow so well. We're definitely in our right timing.
I know. And listeners, our podcast is finally online, accessible. We are
Mm-hmm.
now that this was the fourth episode. So
Yep.
we invite you to listen to our first three episodes. I guess they can just drop in on one episode. It's not necessarily flowing,
Consecutive. Yeah, exactly.
but it helps you. If you listen to the first one, it helps you understand who we are. So
Yeah, at least listen to the first one if you're just dropping in. So yeah, you can get a background with us and then jump around as you need to, like a lot of books that I like to just go, what page has something for me today?
I like that. That's a
On that, we now have our social media up, right? So we have Synergy, Our Journey on Facebook and on Instagram.
correct. Both of them.
And you've also put up our podcasts on iTunes as well, have you not?
Yeah, I have yet to check out. So if there's a listener listening to us on iTunes right now, just give us a sign that,
Mm,
hey, it's working.
yeah, I mean, I might even check it out myself. But But yeah, and then again, listeners, like, please, like, you, Isabel and I can talk all day to each other, but we've already had great interaction from others, and we want more. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear what you have to say, what you would like to hear more of. And at some point, we might make this more of a live interaction kind of
Yeah,
deal. So
we'll get there. That would be fun.
yeah,
Definitely.
cool.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Isabel.
You're welcome. See you next time.
Peace.